Okay, welcome everybody to Health, Housing and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee. This evening, I'm Councillor Myers, Chair of the committee. We will go through our agenda from now. Do we have any apologies? I don't think we have. Is everybody here? And are there...
Councillor Smalley and Councillor Wan are both doing their apologies, and Councillor Healy and Councillor Laura are student.
Okay, so Councillor Smalley and Councillor Wan apologies, and we welcome Councillor Healy and Councillor Waller. Perfect. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. If there are any declarations to be made by members, Councillor Vassie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will declare an interest in that my father is a recipient of the Be Independent service offered by the council mentioned in paragraph 27 of the agenda item.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we shall move on to the minutes of the last meeting, which will need signing. So on the minutes of the last meeting, if we turn to them, happy to take matters arising or any queries or inaccuracies. There is one, and I didn't catch you before, Councillor Rose, but did you want to just mention?
Yeah, actually, I had another point to add to the same thing, which is the manager director of Tube we had, it's on page 6, or page 10, depending on how you count, was planning on circulating some of those waiting times and KPIs to us. I haven't seen anything back on that. The additional thing was to note that the retreat have published 2.5 and 2.6 years on their website as the waiting list for autism and ADHD diagnosis from the point of acceptance or referral. So I guess that gives us an indication of what we were talking about last time around the 2 to 3 years mark, but it would be good to get those numbers, preferably by the next meeting when we ask for them on the previous meeting. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rose, for raising that. Committee members will note that after the last meeting, the hospital trust sent round the information that we asked for of them, and we've made the same request of Tuve. As Councillor Rose pointed out, we didn't get that information, so we'll just follow that one up and we'll get it sent round. Okay. I will just also point out a matter arising from the minutes, which is if on item 7, page 7 on my papers, the committee resolved to receive an update on the winter provision for homeless people at this meeting this evening. Of course, that's not happened, and you'll see on our work plan for tonight's agenda that it's scheduled for the next meeting. I'm happy to take any comments or observations on that issue, but no debate this evening, and we will wait to our next meeting when that's a full agenda item and we've got technical officers that can join us for that item. I will say from the chair that I do find that regrettable, and it's something, as chair of the committee, I hoped that we would be able to discuss the item given the urgency of the matter, and of course the since our last meeting, the changes to the service that have been outlined in the media. And so, you know, I am happy to take comments and observations, but note that we can't debate the issue and we can't make any recommendations because we don't have officers that are able to speak to that item. So from the chair, those are my views, and I'll point out now that when we get to the work plan later on in this agenda, I want to hear all members' views on when the best appropriate time to schedule that item should be. Should it be our next allotted meeting, or should we look to convene a meeting specifically to hear that single issue? But I'll wait until we get to work plan to hear members' views on that issue. So I'm happy to open that out. Councillor Bassey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your remarks on that. And I think many of us share regret that the report that was scheduled for this month hasn't turned up. We had asked originally there was a report due for several months. It's been in our work plan. And we had asked, as you say, for an update on winter provision in particular for rough sleepers, because the weather's getting cold. We've seen temperatures drop 15 degrees in the past week. And I share your concerns about reputational risk, when the council's on the front pages over and over again on the issue of a very vulnerable group of people that is plainly of concern to all of us around this table. I welcome what you've said about maybe discussing how we address this issue and when a meeting may or may not take place under the work plan later on, and we look forward to kind of talking about it then further.
Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add on the topic itself. Obviously, the change in circumstance will be the reason that it moved meeting, I guess. But it does make it quite hard to create a work plan if, when we schedule stuff, nothing lands on the month that it's supposed to land on. So I guess it's not just specifically about the topic of homelessness and the challenges around provision, but all the reports, all the metrics we're requesting, anything that we're scheduling for the following meeting. If it can't happen, let's talk about it on this meeting and agree it's coming 2 months from now. Otherwise, we're going to find a very lopsided agenda each time forward. So it's just a general comment, but not much we can do about it necessarily either.
I think it's a valid comment, and we will tackle that very issue when we turn to the work plan in this meeting, because the next scheduled one's very heavy. I will, just for transparency, make sure members of the committee are aware that once this item was slipped from the agenda, I did make an urgent request to place it back on the agenda, and that was refused. So we work with what we have. So I'm going to move on and ask if the Councillor Runciman.
One practical thing, and then I want to comment. If you can speak into your microphone, please, Jess, because I can't hear you otherwise. But I do agree with both you and Councillor Vassy. I think this matter needs to be dealt with very soon, and I really regret the fact we haven't got a report tonight that we can actually discuss, because it is really important. And as Councillor Vassy says, nights are getting colder and the matter's getting more and more urgent. So I'd support what he says.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Councillor. Okay, I'll ask members if we're happy that the minutes are correct so that we can sign them off. Is that okay? Do I actually need to find a seconder for the minutes? I'll propose that they're correct. Okay, and then I'll approve. That's fine. Yep, I'm going to sign them. And then we can move on to our weighty agenda this evening. Is item 3 is public participation, but we don't have anybody. I should say for again, for transparency, we have got the executive member, Councillor Pavlovic, in the meeting. He's remotely, so he's listening, he's watching, and he's ready to pounce. Should anybody refer to something that he wants to take issue with. So welcome, Michael, in the background there. So we're moving on to item number 4, where we have the finance and performance monitor number 1. So I invite Patrick and Steve Tate, sorry, name missed me for a moment there. Welcome, Steve, and welcome, Patrick. If you could, and Michael, you're joining us at this stage. Welcome, and thank you for the report. Would you like to talk us through it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the report that's presented in front of you covers the Monitor 1 Finance and Performance Report for health, housing and adult social care service areas. It uses extracts of data that were considered by the executive on the 14th of September as part of the Monitor 1 Corporate Monitor 1 report. So the report gives you details of the overall financial position of the council, showing a gross projected overspend of 11.4 million at Q1. That's a continuing trend of pressures that the council's been facing, particularly across adult and children's social care, where demand is increasing, as well as the increased complexity of and cost of care. All members will be aware that this level of overspend is unsustainable, and therefore at the executive at that meeting there was a plan to reduce expenditure, including mitigation of £3 million across adult social care. So from paragraphs 19 onwards, you'll see more detailed analysis of the financial position across adult social care, housing and community safety and the public health services. And from paragraph 59, our colleagues in business intelligence team have identified the performance scorecards relating to the old council plan. Members will be aware that there's a new council plan and that key performance data will be presented to members going forward will be different from Monitor 2. So we're asking you to consider the report. We'll see what questions we'll be able to answer. Obviously, it's a very wide-ranging set of services. Michael's here from housing, Peter's obviously here from public health, Steve's the finance representative from adult social care and health, but if we can't answer questions around the table, we will go back to particular officers in the council and make sure that the whole committee is advised of those. The primary purpose for these reports are to support the committee to identify whether there's particular issues that you'd like to take forward on further scrutiny, whilst taking into account the work plan.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, so open it out to the committee if there are any questions or comments for officers. Okay, I can kick off. That's all right. Peter, in public health, if I could ask you about the staffing vacancies and the impact on service delivery. It's quite a lot of underspend related to staffing vacancies, and of course the council's policy is not to fill those now for this financial year. Could you outline if there are any concerns with service delivery?
Certainly can, Chair. Thank you. And to be clear, the vacancies in the report that are sort of the most pressing are within the Healthy Child Service, so our school, nursing and health visiting services. There are national issues about recruitment within those services and a lack of a workforce and a pipeline through sort of training and qualification post a nursing degree. It needs a further 1-year qualification after qualifying as a nurse or midwife to become a public health nurse. And so we do struggle, in all honesty, to recruit the numbers that we have the budget for, and are continually pressing the market to try and see what we can do in terms of imaginative solutions for that. I think that it's not a new issue, so it hasn't suddenly cropped up. So in a sense, the service cuts its cloth accordingly and is offering the level of service that we can provide based on the staffing that we have. We have recently participated in a bit of a benchmarking exercise across the whole of Yorkshire and Humber with the other 14 local authorities, looking at service delivery for 0 to 19 services, which do vary, but they sort of have a common core. It's called the 4-5-6 model. They do vary, but there's a mandated 5 visits, and there are a number of things which are similar. And that does demonstrate actually that York's service does benchmark fairly well against other areas in terms of what it's able to provide. We know that some other councils have had to decommission entire elements of their service due to funding issues, but we still have a 0 to 19 service that is able to offer across schools and for those who have recently given birth in the first 5 years of life. So we know we're maintaining a level of service which is comparable, but we obviously want to do one that's excellent and be as aspirational as we can. If we could fill those posts, we would be able to offer more to residents. So we are looking actively actually at the moment about what we could do with the service to try and retain staff and make sure that there is enough of a development opportunity and a career ladder within it, because these are often roles that are done and fulfilled within the NHS. So they operate under quite a sort of set sort of banding structure, a little bit like the NHS will do with nurses. And that means actually not a huge amount of sort of wiggle room. And if you find yourself 5-10 years into a role, the next role up is often hard to find. So we're looking at the service and asking ourselves, how can we make sure that that service has the right kind of career ladder for its staff members in. So we can certainly share with committees sort of outcomes of the benchmarking exercise. I think some of the performance data in here, but also more broadly in the council's monitoring of its KPIs will show that we do meet most natural cut targets in terms of the expected number of visits from 0 to 5, the timeliness of those visits. But I can't deny that the staff being in post would improve that, and I think we get a more excellent service. So I think we have a way to go, but a bit of a plan to hopefully improve on the situation within this report.
Councillor Vassie, thank you.
If I could just do a supplementary on that, and thank you for what you said. What really sets the alarm bells for me here is that over the past 4 years, we've been hearing over and over again the lack of career progression as being one key issue. And it's not being resolved. And plainly what we want to see around the table representing the city, all of us, is an indication of how we're going to resolve that. And I'd really like to hear some more from you, please, about the nature of the obstacle and why you think it is that years are passing without us fixing it. I know there's a national context, but I'd really like to understand the local context and what we're doing locally to try and challenge this intractable problem.
I'll come back on that if that's all right, Chair.
Yes, of course.
Is that helpful, or should I wait to the end? Is that okay?
If you come back on that'd be great, please, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bassi. Well, I think it has been going on for a number of years, and I think developing a structure is a priority for us that is able to get development grades within, staff nurse grades would be an example where you don't have to have that qualification initially. It is a service that over the last 3 or 4 years, just like every other service within the council, obviously, has had to deal with its own fair share of ups and downs in terms of COVID delivery. And I think it is fair to say that at a point at which we might have been trying to act on this, public health was pretty overwhelmed and consumed by response to pandemic. We're obviously now out of that, and a good year or two out of that immediate outbreak response. And so this is, as an incoming Director of Public Health, the council, this is pretty much top of my list in terms of things that we need to look at and change. So we can certainly keep the committee updated on that and make sure that that progress is monitored. I commit to you today that we'll do that.
Yeah.
Just come back once more there, because what I'm wanting to hear are the practical steps and the resources you need in order for us to move forwards. I don't doubt your determination that something should happen and the fact that you care about it all, as do all of us around this table. What seems not to happen between the meetings that happen every year is a clear sense of these are the resources that are needed. This is what needs to be done. This is when it will be done in order to get somewhere. And I'm sure you share my concern, the fact that we keep coming back and saying we're not there.
I do, Councillor Vassie, absolutely. And I think that having a restructured service won't magic up the health visiting school nurses within York. So we have to probably set the expectations for some of this vacancy being an issue with us for a little while yet. There are some actions that we can take, and this is my first scrutiny as acting DPH for the city. So I've not been involved in this thus far, but I think within the next 6 months, it's very likely that we will see some change to the service along the lines that has been talked about for a number of years, and we can come back and update committee on what that looks like and when that's delivered.
I'll look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay. I've got a couple of questions. You want me just to go through them one by one? Yeah. Firstly, welcome to your new job and welcome to some old faces that I haven't seen for a while. Anyway, so section 19, your overall table there. Yesterday at Children's, they added a sort of column on the left-hand side that had the overspend as of the end of the year. So you could then compare that to the overspend in Monitor 1, so you could see the direction of travel. It was just quite useful. Not too sure it's too standard, but they had a good news story to tell, so they sort of added that in just for it might be helpful for clarity. So picking up on the two large forecast outturn variances, direct payments, home and day support. I understand, not having been here for a while, that both of these budgets have been regularly topped up at the end of the year by one-off payments. Given the fact that you do have how do I call them, productivity improvement measures and cost saving measures in those two areas, how much of an uplift to the base budget do you think you do need to stop this continuous annual top up where you're exceeding your budget pretty much every year? And I think it was going back to even when I was here, sort of, and that's 9 years ago now. So what do you feel you need to be able to keep in a budget?
So you're right. I think the outturn, comparing it to the current figure, will probably distort stuff because there's a lot of one-off funding gone in at the year end, which probably doesn't show the true position. We are working through that at the minute, so we're hoping with some of our mitigations, they will go further than just this year. They will have a full year effect. And so we've got a fortnightly meeting with heads of service where we're keeping track of these mitigations, and we've got detailed plans behind those where we are trying to forecast what the full year effect of those will be. I can't say off the top of my head what we would need to bolster our budgets. I think what we need to do is do the work to see how those mitigations, how far they take us and what position that gets us in, to then understand the scale of the problem. We're also meeting fortnightly with the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Financial Officer, and that has been one of the tasks that was set us by the Chief Operating Officer. So it's in hand, but I don't have a figure for you at the moment.
No, okay. As long as
I think it'd be
in hand.
disingenuous for me to make one up.
Okay, the committee can pick it up moving forward. Page 17.29, again, going back into the mist of time. The older people's homes were essentially shut down. And the plan was, this is going back now, to build some high dependency dementia type homes. Did that ever happen?
It did. So what happened was called independent living communities.
Yeah.
And so at Marjorie Waite Court and at Glen Lodge, there were about approximately, I would say, another 50 places built that was funded from the Housing Community Agency, if that's right, HCA. And so one of the issues we've got is, I think, that we haven't managed to transfer people's expectations from residential care into those settings. The other thing that's impacting on that in the minute is the redevelopment work at Glen Lodge. So I know my housing colleagues will probably be able to discuss this better than I. There's some issues with a range of apartments in Glen Lodge where other people have had to be decanted, which has kind of restricted our ability to offer that as a real alternative to either residential care or, you know, high volume home care. So I don't know if Matt, if there's anything to add on that.
Yeah, just briefly. So on Glen Lodge, there's the old part, the original part of the building, and then the new wing that was extended recently. The original part of the building is currently empty because it needs a total refurbishment. So we're currently out to tender for a contractor to do that work, and we'll be coming back to executive with a budget in order to deliver that refurbishment work next year.
Okay, any idea when that's going to be completed? Because I presume this is putting pressure on your budget, not having that facility available.
Yeah, so we expect the work to take 9 months, and we're hoping to start on site end of February, early March. So
Okay.
by kind of
Okay.
Christmas, New Year time, end of 24.
Cool. Okay, next question. Paragraph 51, housing revenue account. Typically, after you've paid for maintenance and the costs of running the council houses, what's your typical surplus?
The surplus has been reducing quite significantly over the recent years. So the surplus, I think, for this year was about £340,000, which on,
Is that all?
yeah, it's a very, very low level of surplus, which we do need to start building up again. What the council and what HRAs across the country have been hit by over the years are constraints by central government in terms of what we've been able to increase our rents by. We've obviously been hit by significant levels of inflation. There was some very significant increases needed to be put into the housing revenue account last year because of depreciation costs, the cost of repairs, cost of the pay award, the cost of utilities and shared areas across our estate. And so our budgeted surplus went from about £2 million down to £340,000. So it's quite a precarious position, and we've got to make sure that that level does not reduce any further, and we start to build up those increases again. But obviously then it becomes a member question in terms of what we're able to increase our rents by, not just for making the housing revenue account in a good position, but also what residents can afford and what our tenants can afford, given costs going across all other areas as well.
Okay, because it was that surplus that enabled you to basically build council houses, wasn't it? So if that surplus goes away, our ability to build council houses dwindles to nothing.
We've built in a number of assumptions of the current plan that's going forward, but yes, building new council houses is not economic. If building new council houses was economic, the whole country would be building social housing. But as you can tell, there's very little social housing getting without significant subsidies, whether that's coming from the government or whether it's coming from other tenants.
Okay. So
Is it, sorry, Councillor Healy, is it another question, or you supplement to that? I've just got a number.
okay, no, I'm
I can
more than happy to
I can come back
follow
to
on later.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
is that
I'm
okay?
fine.
Yeah. So if I could bring in Councillor Steels-Walshart, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the point that I had on what was on page 24, and it was about the number of children in homeless households, which has actually increased from 28 to 35 over the last year. Is there any narrative around why it's increased? And can I ask what forms of accommodation are included in families in homeless housing? Is it just temporary as in hotels, or is James House and things like that included? And finally, and I don't think it does, because I think the numbers will possibly be higher, does it include refugees and asylum seeking families? Thank you.
So I'm going to caveat this with that the homelessness isn't part of my housing remit, and neither is the allocation of people to properties. But I can, I'll try and answer it the best I can. And if there's any further questions, I'll take it away and come back, because yeah, Dennis Southall couldn't be here today. So, I mean, I guess that the context is an increasing demand. So our housing waiting list has gone up. The number of people who are telling us they're in housing need and are demonstrating they're in housing need is going up. Affordable housing completions in the city in recent years has not been high enough to meet the growth in demand. We've got particular challenges in York around housing affordability. Lots of newspaper articles last year about how wonderful York is and how house prices have increased faster than anywhere else in the country. Obviously continues to create problems and challenges for the residents who live here. Things like no-fault evictions being a challenge. we have, when we talk about temporary accommodation, our primary building that we use for temporary accommodation is James House. When James House can't meet the demand, we have to find other alternatives. And we have been utilising existing buildings where we can. So that might be council housing stock. We've been continuing to use Ordnance Lane for as long as we can. Crombie House we've been continuing to use. But again, where there isn't capacity in that, we have to find alternatives. And that's where we occasionally use B&Bs, hotel accommodation, that sort of thing. But that's absolutely the last resort, because that's not what's good for our customers, for our residents, and it's also not good from a financial point of view.
Sorry, can I just clarify though, if a family's in James House, are they classed as in homeless accommodation? Or are they classed as a homeless family, or is it just families in bed and breakfasts?
They're classed as being in temporary accommodation.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
so they are classed as a homeless household then?
I'm not sure I understand the news. They're in temporary accommodation,
Right.
awaiting.
I'm just asking if they're counted in the homeless household numbers, this 35, is that including families in James House?
No.
Right.
Yeah, so James House has around 60 apartments within it, and it's pretty much at capacity the whole time.
So that number would be families and things like B&Bs and
It would be,
hotels.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move to Councillor Waller.
Right, thank you. My questions relate to HRA. Simple. Yes, no. The carry forward paragraph 47. Does that include heap schemes from the previous year that were not yet delivered but allocated? And to understand the depreciation charge being up by £500,000, is that on top of the adjustment that was made on the 20th of July of 1.8 million? So is that on top of that?
I'll take the latter one before the former, if that's okay, councillor. So the depreciation charge is the revenue charge, depreciation to the housing revenue account. That is then transferred into the capital budget that provides capital structural repairs for the HRA. So it's all kept internally. And so the depreciation charge last year was about £1.3 million higher than the budget. We're expecting this year's to be £500,000 above the budget. That gives £1.8 million, which is then transferred into the capital budget, which allows you to do the capital repairs, which is what was incorporated within the amendment on the 20th in July 2023. So the two numbers are comparable. They work together. With regards HEAP, my understanding is that those schemes which were committed to go forward will be going forward, and there's budgets available for that, but I don't have details of the individual schemes that were incorporated on that list.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Waller? Okay, thank you. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult report to get to grips with, and there's a lot of individual numbers of hundreds of pounds and thousands of pounds, but when we're talking about the £11 million overspend, £7 million comes from adult social care, and it's quite hard to get from the report details on that. And I appreciate that you can't pack thousands of pages into a document, but I guess picking some very specific points, there's a lot in here from points sort of 27 through 39. But picking a few examples, number 30, 800k increased costs, number 31, 800k from increased costs, 32 increased costs for 800k again, 600k on 36, etc. Now, some of that cost is going to be inflation and challenges around that. Some of the reduced income of the people using the service, is going to be cost of living. But even picking number 39, for example, the average cost per customer increasing by £1,100 per week. I assume that's not inflation. That seems way above inflationary levels. So what we haven't got is any detail for why the costs are increasing. So that this is due to the cost increasing doesn't really mean anything to me. So, and the same with percentage costs. If the percentage costs are all around 4 or 5%, it runs a narrative in my head alongside the history of inflation over the last year. But I wonder if you could give a bit more depth around the adult social care numbers on what the causes of those cost increases are. How much is cost of new staff that are at a higher level than old staff? How much is cost of wages increasing? What other costs are that are in there? Because I think this £7 million increase is the primary reason that we're talking about £11 million in the press all the time, and the primary thing we should be scrutinising as a committee. That's my thinking.
So I appreciate it's difficult, but it's difficult to represent some of this information because some of it is commercially sensitive. And by putting that in the public domain, we kind of weaken our position in the market. So it's quite difficult to put what it, you know, I could say what the gross unit cost is per week that was budgeted and what we're actually paying. So it's quite difficult to do that in a public forum. The things that are really underlying this are probably non-delivery of some savings from previous years. What you've also got is you've got the impacts of COVID. So if you remember at that time, we were just getting people out of hospital as quick as we possibly could, placing them in temporary areas. People then got to move on somewhere at a high cost, and we're kind of at the mercy of the market in some respects because it was funded by health, and we're probably less prudent about the cost of that because we knew we were getting it reimbursed. Well, that's coming back to bite us now. The other issue about health is particularly around continuing healthcare, the amount that they're contributing to packages. So they're under a lot of pressure as well. So they're looking at their resources. Some of these budgets have very small numbers of customers. So the one you mentioned last, the mental health working age nursing care customers, we only budgeted for one person. But in actual fact, we've got 3 people in that budget now. So that could quite easily make that the difference that you're referring to that looks really strange. And I admit that. So I think that sort of non-delivery of previous year's savings, staffing probably less so. So in terms of our own staff, we are seeing a significant improvement in our use of agency staff. Generally, we aren't using that for social work. We do have some in-house services where we are still using quite significant elements of agency staff. So that is coming the right way in terms of the budget. We've had a lack of commissioning resource over the last year and a half, and now we've got a head of commissioning in, and he's starting to put frameworks in place. And those frameworks are starting to say, right, this is the price we'll pay. We're not going to pay above that. You can go to the FAB and say, if you want them to go to that placement, you're going to have to pay the top up. We're working with providers to accept our new framework rate. So I think you've had like conditions in the market weren't in our favour, and for the other things I mentioned, it does feel like we are turning the corner in some of those areas. So I don't know if that's answered your question sufficiently.
Yeah, I think it's answered a lot of it, and obviously the outliers where we've had one person, we've got 2 people now, but the second person is a very different cost per person than the first, are unavoidable, but they won't make a huge dent in the overall size. I guess my concern is that this isn't what the price difference is from now versus last year. This is the price difference between, or the cost difference between now and what we expected for now. So how come we were so far off when we were looking in March at where we are now? Those percentage increases are pretty high. Again, inflation, we anticipated a level of inflation that might be higher than that, but it's a couple of percent. So the things like, I'm just struggling to understand about where those market forces, etc., have changed so substantially since we look at this in the spring, and how we can anticipate better for next year. And as Councillor Healy was talking about, bringing those gaps down on the projected versus actual, so we're not trying to make mid-year pivots all the time, I guess.
So I think last year we were kind of supported by underspend in other areas of the budget. this is why our finance recovery plan is so important. So if we get that right, we will start to become towards a more sustainable budget, and the things like the framework prices are key to doing that. And so we have set these frameworks, particularly in older people's residential and nursing care, particularly in home care, which means we have more control of the market and are able to reduce those prices more to the framework prices and use less exception providers. So I think we've had the legacy of COVID and other pressures that have brought. The other thing to remember is we've just been through something called a fair cost of care exercise. So we've had funding to support that, but I think we're already quite high in terms of what we pay anyway. It was difficult to rebase the budget at the start of the year, but I think we're heading in the right direction now.
One follow-up question about something that's tangential, and thanks for your answers. I'm not trying to shoot the messenger either. I appreciate there's a lot of depth behind all of this. The only other thing was a few examples in there, but picking point 35 on the list as an easy one is it talks about a change to health income received and direct payment per customer changes and some of that. So some aspects of it refer to reduced income of the people using the service, and that being the reason for that change. What are the other reasons? Again, we've got one level deep, but what's the level underneath that? Why are those numbers changing? That's okay. Not specifically on point 35, but in general, other than a greater level of need in the city and a reduced income of the people using the services, is there other stuff changing that price point?
So I think I probably want to go away and answer that have a conversation with my director and respond to that outside of this meeting, if that's okay, because I don't want to give a false message, because it's not just about cost, is it? It's about performance as well.
Yeah.
So I don't want to misspeak, if that's still a term these days.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
I think that's fair enough. Thank you, Steve. Councillor Bassey, and then we'll come back to Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to develop the points made by Councillor Rose there. One of the things that you don't see in this kind of overview is something that people like to use the word granular for, which irritates me as a word, but I think it's part of what we're about here. Am I right in understanding that maybe 50% of all purchasing and procurement at the council doesn't involve purchase orders? I've heard that the amount of ordering that doesn't involve purchase orders has been going up and up and up. And I'd just like to understand if that's correct, because that necessarily impacts on services and also goods, equipment, consumables, everything else. And so the first part of my question is that a correct assessment of where we are? Speaking of adult social care and public health, a lot of their spend is done through contractual tendering arrangements. So there might not be a purchase order raised, but it's done through a process of authorization. In terms of adult social care, a lot of that spend is committed through what's called Mosaic, which is the adult social care system, where we record individual details on there, and that generates payments. In order to get on there, a person has to be put on there by a social worker. That will then have to be authorised by a team manager. And then if it's over a certain rate, it will have to be authorised by a head of service or even a director. So from an adult social care perspective, that isn't true. But I don't know about the other areas of the council. Okay, thank you. Is there a general comment that maybe you can offer, Patrick?
Yeah, you're right that we are the level of purchase orders isn't as high as we'd like them to be. We are working with managers about getting that better. Purchasing in advance, it's how the system works. You raise a commitment as soon as you order things. Obviously, if you're ordering a plank of wood and some ladders, it's far easier to set a purchase order out to Jewson's for a plank of wood and a ladder, and the price will be this. When you're dealing with complex adult social care, you just can't link that into a purchase order. We're also very keen to ensure that purchase orders are done at the time of purchase and not when the invoice comes in, and we'll pay the purchase order at the time that the invoice comes in. So we are working with managers, and I think it's something that's been going through audit and governance as well. We're working with managers about how we can tighten up that system, because we've got to be on top of who we're purchasing work with. Are they on the list of suppliers that we're agreed with? What it is that we're ordering, and we can get a much better view of it through the system. I can't say whether it's 50%, 25%, but it's something we are tightening up across the council.
It's probably worth checking whether adult social care is included within that, because Mosaic does actually produce a purchase order, but not one that's gone through the financial ledger. So I'm happy to go away and check that figure out for you.
Thank you. Can I follow up?
Yeah, and
Briefly.
yeah, of course. And I understand Councillor Rose wants to come in on
Yes.
purchase orders.
Oh, right, okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. And I mean, I'm just going to make an additional comment on purchase orders and then hand it over really. And it's basically for information for everyone around the table. In 2008, the City Council agreed a sustainable procurement strategy, specifically that would cover all areas of council's procurement, from cleaning services to painting to purchasing computers and so on and so forth. That happens right across all the departments. When the Climate Change Committee was set up in 2019, one of the first things we asked, or I can remember asking, was, have we implemented that? And one of the shocking things was that over that period of time, 11 years, corporate memory loss meant that no one knew we'd ever had one. And I worry when I see these, when we look at a particular department's work, and today we're looking at housing, social care and all of that, sometimes we can forget that there are principles that impact on every part of how things are purchased, services and goods, that affect every single area of things. You know, you need pencils, you need computers, you need cleaning products, you need services and all of that. And that's why I asked the question. And I'm one of my concerns is that we don't seem to know how much of these overspends are related to decisions that are made about small and fairly mundane things in some cases that cumulatively have a big impact. And I could ask for a response, or I can wait and let Councillor Rose ask his comment, and maybe officers can respond then.
Yeah, my point was, I guess, a point of information clarity, which is that Audit and Governance discussed this in September. We're anticipating that the report we've asked for, which is a breakdown on the purchase order situation split by department, will come on the 8th of November to the next one. I guess adding to that, my understanding is that it's lower than 50%, but there's also a substantial number of purchase orders that are raised after the invoice is received, which is also not in line with process or best practice. The comment I made on that committee, and no doubt we'll make shortly, and TBD on the data we'll receive, which we haven't received yet, as far as I'm aware, is clearly the system isn't fit for purpose. If it's not supposed to let this happen, but it is happening, either there's no problem with purchase orders being raised below a certain threshold, and we need to be better at reporting on that, or there is a systemic problem here that people aren't following a process that is supposed to be followed. And we've had that conversation with finance, etc. on that meeting. It'd be good to get those numbers distributed and scrutinised in other scrutiny committees, not just A&G. But I'll talk to that in A&G.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. It's a good point of information that we can certainly follow up for the departments that we scrutinise. Do officers want to just give any response to those two query statements?
Well, I think it's just picking up that we're aware of this. We're looking at the results of an internal audit, but we're also looking at how the systems are working and how people potentially are bypassing the systems and what are the rationale for that, because we need to understand what's not working about the current system that means that people are potentially bypassing the system. So if I can, I would rather allow that piece of work to go through the audit and governance route and get the recommendations and see what comes through from that report, and we'll make sure that it's implemented across the council. That's part of because as you say, it's a system that we've got. We should be using it to its full effect. It helps us with forecasting. It helps us with understanding, pulling the accounts together at the end of the year. So, yeah, we need to progress that one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Healy.
Very much, Chair. Only one question left. Top of page 23, indicator number 4, average number of days to re-let empty properties excluding temporary accommodation. It's dropped from 78.73 to 57.78. Good. Is that drop due to the extra £100,000 that you got in the emergency budget post-election? Or was it just a general improvement in service?
Sorry. Meg, there's a number of factors at play, and we've been working hard on this particular metric for a number of months. Additional budget is absolutely helpful and supports us to achieve that and to get the work completed. But yeah, there's a whole host of kind of improvement processes, works that we've put in place to turn that around, and yeah, we're recently starting to see the fruits of that hard work, which is extremely positive.
Cool. So what's your target then? What are you aiming for?
We have a target linked to the amount of rental income we lose through voids, but we don't have a specific target on a number of voids or a turnaround time. But we want that number to be lower, and we believe that we can get it lower.
Okay, leave the committee to pick that up in the future. Last question: what's the average number of vacant houses across the estate at any? Well, what's the average?
So at the moment we have around 60 voids, but that doesn't include properties that we have intentionally left empty because they're due refurbishment work. So Glen Lodge that I referred to previously is in addition to that. We've also got major works taking place in Bell Farm, where we've got some houses that were converted to flats. When they were converted to flats, a bathroom pod was put on the back. Those bathroom pods are starting to degrade, they're unsafe. So those properties have now been emptied, and there's another programme of work coming through, again, starting February, March time, to demolish those pods, rebuild them. So there's 60, I guess, standard voids that are churning their way through the system, plus a similar amount that are in a kind of longer term plan. That 60 voids number is much lower than it's been. It's been as high as around 120 about 12 months ago. So, I mean, I'm not sure I've got an average for you. It's fluctuated, but we're in a better place than we have been for a while. Okay,
so in terms of this committee to track it, because going back to your earlier point about homeless families, if you reduce that number, that reduces the number of people in homeless accommodation. What's a good number for this committee to track over time? Because it seems that this 57.78 isn't that
I would say
useful.
I would say the number of voids, pure and simply, is quite a good one. So I guess part of the challenge with that statistic around the average length of time it takes to turn a property around. So, for example, if you have a property that for various reasons has taken 200 days, the day that that property comes back, it shows in that month's performance figures. So there's an element of, as we're catching up on a backlog that built up, so as we're turning that 120 to 60, we're dealing with some complicated properties that have taken a while to turn around. So that number might actually go up despite the number of voids coming down. So in terms of understanding the number of properties that are available to those in housing need, I would say number of voids, pure and simply, is probably the best figure to track.
Okay. So, well, I don't know, it's your committee. I think it might be quite useful just to have that.
Yeah, you moved me really nicely onto what I did want to raise with committee, and that is the key performance indicators. That's a really good suggestion, and thank you, Michael, for that response. To add the number of voids onto the KPIs that the committee receives on its performance monitor. Patrick, you alluded earlier to the council plan being agreed at last executive, and so some of the measures, more measures that relate to that will be added to performance monitor. I'd like to ask committee members to also have a little think about that as well. I've been on scrutiny. I've done the circle really. We used to have really a lot of measures presented to scrutiny, and on some of the committees at the time, it was felt that was just too many and key performance indicators were getting lost in the raft of data being published and produced for scrutiny. And then so we've gone and we've got a relatively honed set of indicators. So I think it's worth having to think about that between now and the next meeting. York Data's got a lot of information on it that you can look through, and if there's something that interests you or you feel should be raised, then we can add it to our dashboard, with the caveat that some things are going to be added to dashboards because the council plan's recently been agreed. So number of voids is a good one. I've made a note of that, but we will be seeing more added to it, and it'd be good to hear members' views on that. If you have them now, brilliant. If you want to go away and think about that and come back with specifics, then that would be great also. So I'll just open that to comments or other points to make, and I'll invite Councillor Rose in.
Yeah, I certainly agree that we should have the voice on the KPI list. I wasn't asking questions about it because we will return to it on the work plan at some point. I haven't seen it listed, but I know it's one of the things we talked about before. I just thought it'd also be worth adding onto it the number of non-homeless people in temporary accommodation, if that's not listed here, to catch that sort of loophole, if you like, that was identified earlier, if that's possible as well.
Yeah, thanks for those, Councillor Rose. I'll bring, should I bring you in, Patrick? I'll take more comments from around here. Is it? Yeah, I'll bring you in, Patrick, and then we've got Councillor Vassie, and I've got remotely Councillor Pavlovic. So, Patrick.
I was just going to highlight the you indicated in the council plan that particularly relate to housing, which you will be getting. I think the first time they'll be reported is to the executive at Monitor 2 in November, so they'll come through to you in the next scrutiny committee. And to some extent, that's why you don't have the big list of performance indicators in this report, because we're in that transition zone from the old regime to the new regime. So just picking up a couple of them, the percentage of dwellings with energy rating A to C in the EPC register, that there'll be a snapshot that will be provided on an ongoing basis. Number of void properties, standard voids, you've talked about voids. Number of people sleeping rough, that'll be a new one that's being brought forward to you. The percentage of residents reporting good or excellent experience with the council, that's new. So they're the new ones, but there's also some key ones that have been agreed by the executive that will be coming forward on a regular basis. So I just thought that'd be useful.
That's really useful. Thank you, Patrick. Councillor Vassie, and then we'll go to Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Chair. I remember hearing some time ago that we had, was it over 20,000 performance indicators we measured? And part of what I remember when I first heard that, I thought it was one of the most boring things I'd ever heard. And then slowly started to recognize that actually that is the measure of how you see a place, how you see what we're doing. And we've got maybe 15 of them here. What we need as members really is to be aware of the ones that are doing very well and the ones that are doing very badly. And part of the challenge is that putting them on sheets of papers in the hundreds is impenetrably dull. And I wish we could join the best practice that exists in other parts of the world to present these things differently. I understand why we're printing things in black and white, but plainly traffic lights help. The most inspiring thing I've ever heard, and I'll say this because I think these things are useful to know, the most inspiring way of presenting thousands of performance indicators that I've heard was for a business in New York, which presented all the futures markets as trees in a landscape. And the trees that were dying were the ones that were doing badly. And the trees that had grown hugely above the others were the ones that were doing very well. And the rest were just kind of sitting there. And the reason it was useful was that that's how human beings work. That's how our minds work. That's how our vision works. And people, when presented with 1,000 performance indicators in the right way, can see the ones that matter in the glance of an eye. You can see 100 ones that are worth looking at and disregard all the others. And I hope that going forwards, maybe this is another thing for audit and governance, Councillor Rose, I don't know, but I think the way we present this kind of information is critical to our ability to use it constructively to improve services. And I would be more than happy at a future meeting to hear that we were looking at new ways of doing this so that we're not all boring each other rigid on stuff that's actually really important.
Is it on this,
Yes.
Councillor Rose? Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to start becoming a mouthpiece for A&G, so I won't do that. But I guess two things. 100% agree. I think there's a lot of one level lower performance indicators that might not be KPIs, but they are really useful for us to know about. Would welcome more visibility of it and clearer indications of what's good and bad. Only other thing is, it does have indicators on there with an up and down arrow with good and bad written on it. The online version is colour, so you can see green and red, but it matches good and bad anyway. But it's direction of travel only. So it's not based on threshold of performance. So if something's got better, but it's still awful, it looks like it's got better. And if something is fine, but it's got marginally worse, but it's well within acceptable thresholds, then it looks worse. And that kind of roughly level doesn't really help either. So I think there is a better way of looking at metrics and performance on those numbers, but a conversation for another time, probably.
Yeah, thanks for those contributions. That's good points. We'll bring in Councillor Pavlovic, please.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I think Patrick actually covered the areas on the new performance indicators that reflect the council plan that you will now be getting sight of, and if you want to have early sight of them, they will be published in the executive papers for the executive public meeting when we cover quarter two. But the ones that I'm particularly enthused by are the voids numbers, which is the ones I specifically asked for, and the rough sleeper count, because as you know, we've been working to, and I've been saying this for many a long year, that we've been working to a set of artificial figures that are basically an indicator of a snapshot in time on one weekend or one day when they do the annual street count for the government. So this way you will now get to see it on a monthly basis if you want to, but it will be published whenever you get your quarters, your financial monitors to have a look at and to scrutinise, and that's the whole point of publishing them. I don't find them, yes, I can understand why you would say that they were boring, but they are an indicator of where the council is at any given time, and these are the bits that you need to scrutinise members and you need to scrutinise officers about. And if you have indicators and issues that you feel that you haven't seen, particularly within my portfolio areas, which will be housing, as far as this committee is concerned, then tell me, and I will make every endeavour to make sure that you get that detail. So I'm happy to be fed back through by yourself, Chair. If committee has some thoughts, if you want to feed them through to me, I'll get you responses for them.
Okay, I really appreciate that, Councillor Pavlovic, and thank you for joining the meeting. I'd just say as well, nobody's calling you boring, Councillor Pavlovic. We just all enjoy different things.
No, it was the stats that were boring. I never for a minute thought any of you were calling me boring. Good grief, no. Though I was thinking of maybe even give the data in interpretive dance. But I like the trees. I like the trees model better.
Okay, we'll, yeah, certainly save that one, Councillor Pavlovic, but I hear that as a proposal, so I'm going to note that down anyway. Thank you. Anybody else got any more comments on this item, finance performance monitor? Councillor Vassy.
Just quickly to finish that off, given that I think I'm the only person who was on this committee over the past 4 years, and I've only been in it for 4 years, and so on and so on and so forth. Might it be helpful if Patrick was able to provide all members with the full list of KPIs that relate to this area just once, so that we could at least have a sense of what we could be asking to go in here? Because in a sense, you know, saying, well, what would you like to see in here is a bit difficult, because we don't know the rich seam of information that Patrick has.
Patrick.
If I can answer that, what I suggest is we'll, as I say, with the new council plan, and we do have reams of performance indicators, but these are the old set. So when you'll probably get a similar set of pages at the next scrutiny that considers that. And I think when you have the chance to look at those and see whether or not there's any gaps in terms of what you're looking for, you can then feed that back through that process. That's probably the easiest way of doing it.
Okay, I guess keeping that on review for awaiting the next suite of measures, but I do seem to remember being in a similar position where for one meeting, the whole raft were printed off and members did have a little look and suggest additions to the dashboard that they received. So we'll keep that on review in a sense. Thank you for contributions and responses, officers. Can we move on? Is that okay, to the work plan? Yep. So item 5 is the work plan. We turn to that at page 27. You will now see, as alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, that the 13th of November is a busy meeting. The top 2 items were slipped from our last meeting. And then, of course, item number 5 is added on to there as a result of it not being heard today. So I think that's too unwieldy. And so the options from the chair that I'd pose for you to consider and comment on are whether to keep the diary as it is, but move things backwards in time, or forwards in time, so that we work within the same calendar, but push some items from the next meeting on a meeting. Or do members want an additional meeting scheduled so that we can manage to get through the business that we've set on the work plan? And I'll bring members' views on that. But the point I did want to make is that I believe our next meeting should have the overview of winter provision for homeless people and on the homelessness strategy as its main first item that the committee hears. So whether that is on the 13th of November or at a date that we choose to schedule now, that has to be the priority of the committee. So that's my view, and how we achieve that, I want to hear what members think, because it's really important we get consensus on all of our diaries and our priorities. So I'll go to Councillor Runciman first.
Chair, I think the most important thing is that we know that we will get a report. That's the key bit of information. If we say we want an early meeting and there still isn't a report, then we've wasted our time. If we say it's on the 13th of November and we're absolutely certain we're going to get the report that we want, then that's fine. And officers are going to have to commit to that, I would say. We can't go any further than the 13th of November.
Councillor Vassy.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Runciman and with your comments. We've already noted our regret that the report isn't there, and we've noted that we can't talk about it because there's not a report, and it makes it impossible for us to do something that we think is very important. Since our last meeting, I have to say, I've learned a great deal about the Salvation Army service, which I was hoping that we would be talking this time. I think there are a whole raft of questions that need asking. I've prepared a list that can be circulated to give an idea of the kind of things that I think need to be looked at. But the absolute key is that we've got to have a report. And my personal view is, in relation to what you've said about the overloading of next month's meeting, this matters because we're dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in Europe. I would rather commit to spending a couple of hours before the 13th of November to get a discussion about this with a report, with an update on the situation, so that we can do our duty for those vulnerable people, rather than let it pass for another month. It shouldn't pass for another month. It matters now. And yes, we know there's politics involved and all that stuff, but we're here, and all of us are here. We're elected because we want to represent people. And I'm more than happy to make some time to do that between now and the end of the month. I'm quite sure that there are other people on this side, and I imagine on the other side as well, who would like to do that. So I'd like to recommend that we consider agreeing a date for a meeting, I would say before the end of this month, if at all possible, with a report so that we can actually get on and discharge our duty for rough sleepers and the homeless. And can we distribute, sorry, could the questions maybe just be distributed so that people have an idea of what we're, certainly what I think we could be talking about. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vassy. I'm going to bring Robert in. And just awaiting Robert, would you like to come in and I'll wait this paper?
Yeah, of course. As Councillor Runciman said, my only sort of concern with trying to arrange another meeting is the agenda for our next meeting goes in 2 weeks from now. And it would basically be, I don't have, and I'm not sure, I don't think officers here could guarantee exactly when we could do an item on, say, the winter homelessness provision is like a extra meeting, and when we could put that in. So we could sit here and go, yes, we'd all like another meeting, but I don't think I could guarantee that we would actually have a separate meeting on it. And it might be probably best to actually think, let's look at that in November when we've got that set on the work plan. And it might be, I mean, obviously it's for the committee. I am looking, we do have January, where we only have one item currently in January. And are there some items here on the November 13th? Because I know it's obviously several items extra than we'd intended for it to be. But are there some of those items that could go to the 30th so that we have time on the 13th to properly look at things like the homelessness provision?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming in there, Robert, because we need to understand expectations as well. The point that Councillor Runciman made about ensuring we get the report is key as well. So that's whirring around in my mind, and I'll take Councillor Rose and then come back on some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of the comments that were made. There's no point in a meeting without a report. So if a meeting's too soon, it's a waste of time scheduling it. If the meeting's too late, it's going to be the same date or thereabouts as the next meeting anyway, in which case redistributing the agenda items makes more sense. Can the finance performance report schedule for December move into January? Can we waterfall some of these items? I think we can. Is it better to try and tackle this earlier? Yes. Having a skim of this, having not seen it in advance, but having a skim of this, these are good questions to ask. I think there's also questions around what was provided previously and how does that compare to now? What should we be providing that neither we in the past nor currently provide, which some of this covers. And it would be good to make sure that the report, when we receive it, does actually address all the points we want it to address. Because if we're asking these questions and the report doesn't answer it, all the questions and comments we'll get are, we'll take that away and come back to you another time. So I think all of that will take a bit of time. I'm not sure if this month is doable, but I echo the sentiments on the other side of the table for sure.
Okay, I get that, Councillor Rose. I'll just say before I bring Councillor Waller in and then Councillor Healy that myself and Councillor Vassie, in pursuing this item to be brought to this meeting, we have got an assurance that it will be heard at the next meeting from the director. I'd have to check the words, but he has made that clear to us that it's on the agenda, and it's his view that it should be heard on the 13th of November. And the questions here from Councillor Vassie have been sent to the director as well, at least most of them. And so there is an understanding of some of the queries that are wanting to be understood by the committee. Is that right, Councillor Vassie?
I think so. I think from the point of view of this meeting, we've all expressed concerns that we expected a report at this meeting and it's not happened. And we get an assurance that it'll come to the next meeting. And there's a certain degree of cynicism, I think it's fair to say. And that's worrying because this matters. And I know that we're in a sense, we're putting Robert in a difficult position. And I'm not that's not what I'm trying to do. But I think the Scrutiny Committee must have the right to make clear that it wants this to happen, that it is urgent, that these questions need answering, and that waiting another month is not a great solution for the people who are sitting out there in the cold. And I would like to hope that in the senior management team, there was a recognition of that and a determination to help us make sure that a discussion happens sooner rather than later. In the previous administration, I don't know if it was linked to the administration or not, I'm not privy to that, but it was understood that it was possible for scrutiny committees to ask for special meetings to take place when something was important. That was established during COVID because it was very difficult to hold meetings. I don't know if that principle still pertains, but if it does, I would like to think that we could mobilize getting a meeting organized sooner than the 13th. I'm happy to take advice on whether that's the case or not. I don't know. So I suppose what I'm saying is I would like this committee to recommend that a meeting happens sooner rather than later and indicate that we have a list of questions. Others may have a whole variety of other questions they want answering. I'm not saying that's a definitive list, but certainly making it clear that, you know, we have questions that need answering. We want to hold a meeting.
We have Lindsay online. I don't have the title, Robert, but it's a head of service for legal or solicitor.
I'd ask Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Hello, Chair. Hello, members. Thank you. I'm head of democratic governance. I just wanted to jump in. Sorry, I couldn't be physically in the meeting because I've just joined at the last minute. But completely understand and hear and appreciate members' concerns about this. What I will say is that we have got an assurance from the corporate director that this report will absolutely be brought to your meeting on the 13th of November. What we don't have tonight is an assurance that that report could be brought any sooner. And I just remind you of the legal requirements that when we run a public meeting, we have to give by law 5 clear working days notice of that meeting. So we would have to, if we publish an agenda tomorrow, say, the earliest we could run a meeting is Friday the 27th of October. So we can't just arrange a meeting and then run it any less than 5 clear working days after we've published that agenda, and bring into that the complication as well of getting a report. As I said, I don't know, because we haven't got the officers here. I don't know the earliest that they could have that report ready for you. But what I will say is that we have seen a written confirmation that they will absolutely commit to having that report published and bring that report to the meeting that you have arranged on the 13th of November. Having said that, of course, it's up to you as a committee to decide what you want to do. And if you do want to arrange an additional meeting, of course, that's within your rights to do so. But I just want to point out the kind of risks that you might face in terms of having the information available to you, and also the logistics of arranging a formal meeting within that timescale. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, Lindsay. I think we're getting somewhere, but I understand the urgency. I'll take the last 2 indicators, and then we'll get to a position, and happy to steer us in a direction. Okay, Councillor Waller.
Thank you. I think it's important to get to the nub of why it is there isn't a report here today. And it's unfortunate there is not an officer around the table able to answer that question. It's not Patrick's area, and it's not Michael's area. And I just wanted to check 2 questions. I appreciate, Councillor Myers, it was not at your doing. And whilst he's online, I just wanted to check that it wasn't anything that the executive member had arranged for it not to happen.
I think this might be Michael's cue to run. Is he still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. Absolutely, it wasn't. I wasn't aware that it wasn't coming to your committee until I got a briefing about it yesterday. I want this issue to be discussed, and the sooner it's discussed, the better. And and I concur with pretty much everything that I've heard round the table this evening on this matter. So certainly not at my instigation, Councillor Waller.
Right, I'm grateful to have that assurance. I think based on the information that we have tonight, which is there is a supposition that the director will produce a report for a future meeting. Would be nice if he'd been online to be able to answer questions about whether that report could or could not be produced in time for an urgent meeting. I do think it does require an amount of time to be discussed, and that is a priority, so that it gets the appropriate questioning through scrutiny, because there's a lot of things that will come out in today's newspaper, which I'm sure that committee would want to get to the bottom of. So there's a great deal of material to go through. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Waller. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. It was another question, as Michael is online, and thank you for staying online so long, executive member. Can you just give us some idea about why it's been delayed another month?
The director is on compassionate leave. The head of service wasn't available to prepare the report without the approval of the director. And the corporate director was involved in it too late in the day to be able to agree this, is my understanding from the briefing that I got yesterday. So I think Danny, the chair, sorry, Councillor Myers, has had the briefing from Democratic Services and from the corporate director to that effect.
Yeah,
Is what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so Councillor Rose, can we, I guess we're going to want to move on, so
Yeah.
I'll allow one more
I thought you
remark.
caught my hand before you created the cutoff, but yeah, I think one of the things worth noting, I mean, obviously we need to have the right people on the meeting as well as the report in advance. The other thing worth noting is the next 2 weeks are half term. So the preparation of the report and the right people on the meeting may be disrupted by that, as well as other things. So just flagging that. Ditto for the impact of waterfalling items. If we have tried to stagger housing and health, social care, the more that we mess around with the agenda, the harder it is to not have every single member of staff from every department on every single meeting. So just flagging those challenges around resource.
That's a fair point to make. So what I'll do is, yeah,
To make one last intervention, Chair.
of course.
And
Councillor
I'm hearing the way we're talking about this. I think what's critical would be really helpful is if we could ask for reassurance that delaying until the 13th of November will not impact negatively on the services that are currently received by rough sleepers. What I would hate to see is us turning up in a month's time and being told, oh, sorry, you're too late. The decision's been taken. We can't go back. Things have happened in the past month. That's what would really, I think, frustrate and annoy huge numbers of people and place people at greater risk than they are already. So I don't know if we can ask in a recommendation for that reassurance. And I hope everyone would support that.
Yeah, it's a really fair point. I think the public deserve that reassurance, as do committee members. And so I second that. And if everybody's in agreement that we seek that clarity from service managers, then we'll go off and do that as chair and vice chair. If that's okay with everybody, I'm not going to ask for a vote, so we'll just do that work. Councillor Steele's Walshaw.
Following on from
You
Councillor Vassey's. Within that reassurance that it's not going to affect people, can we also have some assurance of whether or not there's going to be a cold weather protocol for this winter? Because it may have activated by the time we come to that meeting. Sorry and thank you.
Chair. There will be a cold. There will be a cold weather protocol. Yes, that will certainly be in place.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Councillor Pavlovic.
Sorry, I would have put my hand up, but you might not have spotted it.
Okay, that's great. I have made a note of that. I would actually like some written information that we can share around the committee about the cold weather protocol. So I'll pursue yourself, Councillor Pavlovic, and the officers on that particular point, Councillor Steele's Walshaw. Okay, right. I'm going to do this now. And I think what we should do is we should stick with the 13th of November as our date. Myself and Councillor Vassey, as chair and vice chair, will seek to rearrange business, and we'll seek to waterfall, term I've not used before. That's a good one. Some of the items on at after discussion with the directors and service managers about what could, in terms of timelines, get nudged on a month or potentially 2 months. I'm not wedded to the idea that we do health, adult social care, public health, housing. I thought it was a good idea to kick the committee off with, but I'm not going to get stuck in that cycle when I think we can mix some business. We're going to have to mix some business at our next meeting. But the key point I'd like to make is that, as I've said, that item goes to the top of the agenda. We have a commitment that we'll get a report. We will pursue the idea of an earlier meeting, and I can feed back to the committee on that, though, given some of the things that have been raised about potentially the staff being available to do that, and also the half terms, it might not be possible, but I will pursue it and report back, knowing that anything that was agreed outside of this meeting to create a new meeting would need to work with the council's legal requirements to publicise meetings. I think if I can leave it at that, that would be good. I hope that's clear in what I'm intending to do for our next meeting. But one thing that nobody's mentioned as yet that I would also want to say so that you're aware is that I do want to invite our partners to that meeting. They have Salvation Army or Changing Lives and other partners that the council works with in this service delivery. In previous years, they regularly attend scrutiny meetings and answer queries about their service from committee members and their partnership working with the council. And I think it's very reasonable to ask if they'd be able to attend our next meeting. So if there's any partners that you know of in this area that you'd like to make me aware of so that we can extend an invite beyond Salvation Army and Changing Lives as two of our key partners that I am mentioning now, then please get in touch and we can ensure a timely invite sent to them. Councillor Vassie.
Very much support that, Chair, and suggest that we should maybe also invite some of the service users to hear directly from the people who benefit from these services. And to ensure that everyone knows, I've attended at least 2 meetings where the Salvation Army turned up previously. And I have to say, I personally think that the city is hugely well served by the massive experience they have, practical experience of going there every day and seeing reality on the ground, and having an independent voice is hugely of value to this city. So agree with the people you said, and let's add some service users.
Yeah, that's a key point, Councillor Vassie. Thank you for that. So that also extends to committee members. If you do think of a group that it would be important or necessary to invite, then let us know. Okay, with that agreed, is that okay, Robert, for you in terms of what we've agreed? And then we can move on and get on.
There we go. Yes, that's completely fine.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to close the meeting if that's all right with everybody. Thank you for your time at HHASC. Oh, I forgot. I've already been told we can't do that. Any urgent business that a member would like to make me aware of? No, okay, then that means we can close the meeting. Okay.